Thank you for attending, everyone. My name is Caleb Page. I'm the CEO of PropertyScout.io. We are a real estate data provider providing public records data and more throughout the United States. I'm pleased to introduce my good friend Dan Golsmith here, who has had a great experience with PropertyScout.io. But as I learned about what he did, it was even more exciting to hear about what he has done with the businesses he's helped. In just the last few years, Dan has generated over $200 million of revenue for the remodeling companies where he worked. He most recently served as the Chief Marketing Officer for Home Genius Exteriors, where he rebuilt their call center and introduced new lead sources that generated well over $10 million of net new revenue in the first year. He holds a marketing-focused MBA from the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland, where he's now a professor teaching marketing, management, and strategy. Dan's excited to have recently launched a consulting business called Master Key Marketing, where he helps remodeling companies help develop their call centers and lead generation programs. I want to give a warm welcome to Dan. I'm really excited to see the fantastic presentation he's prepared. Take it away, Dan.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Hey, everybody, and welcome. My name's Dan Golsmith. I'm super thrilled to be here with you guys. And to sort of set this up and frame it a little bit, I'm really happy to be here because we are living in the age where technology can really drive customer experience. And what we have seen very clearly in the data across many companies in which I've worked is that customer experience is the thing that helps drive a super efficient and profitable sales funnel, all the way from creating really strong raw leads all the way down to creating demos and eventually sales. So what I want to share with you today is the story of how one company really made their funnel work a whole lot better, helped drive their outcomes, drive the business forward. And then we're going to break it all the way down, all the way back to the research that informed some of the decisions that we made, how we rolled out a new process, how Property Scout.io was part of that process. And we really made a super strong process for creating repeatable, scalable, high quality, high intent sales leads for your in-home sales team. Okay, so to sort of start things off, I just want to start with the end in mind that when I started working with this particular company, and this is what their funnel looks like, they had a raw lead, they had a set, it would confirm, it would issue out to sales, and then there would be a demo. The efficiency of that process when I started was only 11%. Now, that may be a shockingly low number to some of you, depending upon what your individual business looks like. For example, if you're a high-end remodeler doing kitchens and baths, your funnel looks completely different than this, and that's okay. But that having been said, saying maybe a little bit differently, of all the people that raised their hand and said, yes, I'm interested in that, only 11% were actually seeing a price. And so obviously there's a lot of efficiency to potentially pick up here. And they had a lot of the same problems that a lot of folks in home improvement had, starting with the first call, the first touch point that a customer is going to have with the company was clunky, it was inconsistent, didn't really give them a warm fuzzy. And so people would drop out of the funnel and sort of go, that felt weird, I'm kind of not into this. We also had just sort of basic issues around data input errors, right? Rep would go out to the wrong house, it'd be the wrong time, all those kinds of things. And we have a basic issue in home improvement in general. And I'm going to say it again later, but I think it bears repeating now. In most cases, someone hiring you is hiring you to perform major surgery on what is probably the biggest asset that their family will ever own, right? There is a certain amount of tension in that decision. There's a certain amount of anxiety in that decision. And so when someone's motivation isn't particularly high to start with, either because of how the lead was created, knocking on a door and, mom opens the door and she's got a baby on her hip and spaghetti's on the stove and she's trying to figure out why you're talking to her about a roof right now, whether it's that or they just don't want to spend the money or they're just nervous about having someone in their home, whatever it is, a lot of leads just don't have a particularly strong motivation to go all the way through the funnel and all the way through your process. But if you have a tight buttoned up process, you can make it look a whole lot better. So after we rolled out this new process, I'm going to show you everything today, every last piece of it. We actually drove an improvement in the funnel from 11% to about 19% in about 10 weeks. Now, some of you may be sitting there going, 19% is still not good. And yeah, no, there's definitely room to grow from that for sure. That was just the first 10 weeks. But in that growth, we drove about 73% growth in demos from any given volume of leads, right? So however many leads came in the top of the funnel, 73% more demos were actually going through to the sales team. And so basically, you're significantly growing your sales opportunities at almost zero net new marketing costs. So what does that do? Creates more sales opportunities, more revenue, lowers your marketing costs, more money drops to the bottom line, and you become much, much more profitable. I'm going to show you the exact playbook that I use to help drive this company from $35 million to about $78 million of revenue in just 1 year. Now, I do want to say in full transparency, Property Scout was not the only thing that did that. There were lots of people doing a lot of hard work, doing a lot of great work, driving other areas of the business forward. But every piece of that work had to drive through this gate. They all had to come through the call center. So what we're going to share with you today is a really great technique for improving the efficiency of your call center. And it starts with understanding what's going on in the customer's mind with the call, because this is really the why. This is why we made all these changes and why it's built this way, as opposed to the almost infinite number of ways you can try and build a call center process. So it starts with understanding the customer. And so I actually literally conducted a bunch of focus groups. That's a picture from one of the focus groups that we did, talking with homeowners across the country about what their needs were, what their fears were, what was motivating them, what was standing in their way. And we followed that up with 30,000 surveys sent to a large variety of homeowners all across the country, asking them these questions so that we could get a really good statistically significant sample. And what we found in that is that there are 5 sort of basic categories of fears or anxieties that customers have when they come into our process. And it starts with the idea of personal safety. They are inviting a stranger into their home, right? And so they are concerned about their valuables. There are a seemingly large number of people who are concerned that if they have weapons in their home, that the person in their home may get access to their firearms or whatever. And especially for any female family members in the house. If you've been in this industry a while, you'll know about the whole idea of getting porched, right? Where your rep shows up to the house and dad comes out of the house like this and crosses his arms and closes the door behind him. And it's usually because he's got a teenage daughter in there that he doesn't want you anywhere near, right? So this is a thing that sort of lurks around in the back of people's minds. Secondly, and these are in rank order, by the way, so personal safety is the largest, most common concern inviting someone into your home. Secondly is about affordability. We all know that this is going to cost money. A lot of people generally don't want to spend the money. And even if they're at the point that they're like, yeah, okay, we have to spend the money. We got to get the roof done, got to get the windows done. I'm tired of looking at this kitchen, whatever it is. They don't necessarily want to spend the money. And if they can avoid it, they kind of want to. Third one, they're worried about making a they're worried about the contractor not doing the work well. Of course, this is going to come as no surprise to anyone on this call. They're worried about poor quality work, people running off with the money, that sort of thing. Fourth is they don't feel like they have the expertise to make a really good decision, right? They don't know what they don't know. Like they don't know who to trust, and they're worried that they're going to be undersold or oversold. And finally, there are so many options, right? This person says buy this model. This person says buy this model. Who do I trust? Who do I believe? I don't know. And so all this is kind of like running around in the customer's mind when they finally decide to pick up that call. And again, this is not just me saying this. This is validated over a huge number of people that we've surveyed across the country. So if you take all these and you break them down a little bit, what you see is that basically 4 out of 5 of them come down to the idea of trust. They need to have enough trust in you to be able to go through your process and ultimately select you as your vendor. And then there's affordability, and we'll talk about that at the very end. So this whole process that I'm about ready to share with you is really about building trust with the customer so that they have this warm fuzzy. Not only does it make them more likely to keep their appointments with you, it also makes it much more likely for them to be able to feel good about buying from you because that in-home sales rep is really starting from a much, much better place. Okay, so lastly, I do want to make the point that I sort of alluded to it earlier. Depending upon how a lead starts, that lead may be looking for a reason to cancel. So if you're in a situation where you do a lot of canvassing, you know full well that people will sometimes just say yes to canvassing to get somebody off of their front porch, right? And so we want to try and do whatever we can in that call. It's not 100%. It doesn't always work, but we want to make the best, strongest lead that we possibly can so that more people keep their appointments and we set up our in-home sales team for success. Okay, so how do we do this? How do we build trust in that first call? Because that first call sets the tone for everything that comes after. The first thing, and this has nothing to do with Property Scout, we'll get there in a minute, but the first thing is you want it to feel friendly. You want it to feel conversational. You want it to feel like talking with a friend, someone who's got your best interest in mind. And we'll talk about how to do that in just a second. Secondly, you want to create a feeling of being confident, of being competent, so that the person on the other end of the phone gets this feeling of being in safe hands. I can trust this person. They've got my best interest in mind. They're going to look out for me. They're not going to mess around and run off with my money and stuff like that. How do we do that? We create strong, smooth, very confident calls that build that trust in people. A company feeling like it is local implies better service to many homeowners. I'm sure you've had the experience where you call up a call center and that person has no idea where you are or what's going on in your life, and it just feels so big and impersonal. Especially when we're talking about real estate, you want to feel like somebody is a part of your community, and that not that you're literally going to go down to their office and yell at them if something's wrong, but you're definitely not going to drive from DC to Minnesota to yell at a contractor, right? So people want to know that you're in their community, you're part of their community. It helps you feel more trustworthy. And lastly, that we're keeping our commitments. That when you set up a rep to arrive at a certain place, at a certain time, that actually happens. And data entry errors are kind of like the enemy of that. Before I move on to the actual process, I do want to make one more point, which is the whole other side of this equation, which is really important, right? We've been talking about the customer this whole time, but we have needs as well. We need to make sure that the people that we're sending our in-home sales reps out to are qualified, right? So a lot of calls tend to focus on us getting what we need out of the call. And what I'm sort of advocating for here is, yeah, we do need to get what we need. We need to make sure that their property is in the right location, it's got the right style, we know who owned it, that they agree to give us the time to meet with them, all those kinds of things, but that we also need to think about the customer and what his or her needs are additionally, right? So we do also need to do all these things. And so if you think about that, if you put that all together in your head, that's a lot, right? So it's a lot of pressure on a first call. We have to build trust and motivation to get them to keep the appointment. We need to sort of proactively address and reduce a customer's fears to get them to keep the appointment and to set up a great sales experience down funnel. And we need to make sure that we get what we need, which is that we're properly qualifying each and every lead that comes through our funnel. And we need to do that in the first call. For those of you that use a confirmation process where there is a second call to sort of confirm everything and you're double checking the work of the first CSR, that's great. But that call should ideally be light and breezy, and there shouldn't be anything new. It's just confirming, right? So the basic idea is we want to get all this stuff done in the first call, make sure everybody's on the same page. And the confirmation call is quality assurance. It's a double check. It's a reminder for the homeowner too. But it's not meant to be its own thing that serves some other purpose of informing the customer of things that they didn't already know. So we do this in three ways. First way is we develop a very strong lead intake script. I'm going to show you a specific example of what that looks like here in the next few slides. Second, we want to QA our calls for friendliness and tone. And what I mean by this is I don't want somebody in your organization listening to calls. I want you as a business owner or the manager listening to calls and just asking yourself, aside from issues of process, which is important, but aside from that for a moment, is this the kind of conversation that I would want to have with somebody? Does this person make me feel like I'm valued? Do I feel like this person is projecting confidence and competence, right? How does it feel to you? Whether or not what they're saying is technically accurate, which also matters, but how does it feel? How does it read across the phone? Is that a great experience? If so, you're setting the customer up for a great experience and your sales rep up for a great experience. If it's not, it's something that you train to. But it's important that that step be done just to make sure that people are having the experience with your brand that you want them to have. And then lastly, and the subject of this webinar, is that we roll out technology alongside our CRM that's going to complement this process and is going to enable us to create really smooth, effective calls that don't have all the sort of bumbling and stumbling that can go along with it. Okay, so that's sort of the setup of this. Let me show you Property Scout as a tool quickly. I'm going to run you just through some screenshots and call some things out. And then I'll show you exactly how we implement this in the actual call center script. So here we go. So when I log into Property Scout, I'm going to type in an address. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And this is what's going to come back to me. Now, these people, Mr. Kelly here, please do not call them. This is just literally a random address that I just created off the top of my mind. They have no association with me or anybody else. There's just some random person off of the internet. But you're going to get the names of the property owners. So right away, right off the top, you're going to know who owns the property. Secondly, you're going to get an image, and this is all right here in front of you. You're going to get an image of the house so you can see, what style of house does it have? Does it have a sloped roof? Does it have a flat roof? All those kinds of things that you can see right from the front of the house. Does this look like the kind of house that we work on? It's going to show you what year the property was built. Now, you may or may not care about the year built for your purposes in your particular business, but it does matter for the process overall, and I'll show you why in just a second. And it also gives you the estimated value of the house. So for some of you, this is going to be important. If you're a high-end remodeler and you do $100,000 kitchens, you're probably not putting a $100,000 kitchen into a $150,000 house. So that may be a qualifier for you. But the point is that all of this information, all the stuff that you need to qualify a prospect and to enable a smooth call is right here in front of you. Can you go to a whole bunch of different county assessor's office that all have different interfaces that you have to type in and try and figure out where the information is, and then then go to Google Street View and then see that? Yeah, you can do those things. Sometimes doesn't work everywhere, but putting it all right in front of somebody really empowers them to create the best possible call. Then there's one other really cool piece. So you're going to click on this second link right here, and it's going to take you to this page where you can get, for example, a blown up version of the street view. So you can see the house in much more detail if that's relevant to you. You can also see an aerial view of the house. So you can look down if you're doing roofing or decks or driveways or whatever. You can get a sense of what you're working with. And the other cool thing is that you have a map here. So you can figure out if they're in your service area by zooming in and out and sort of seeing where they are and figuring out which rep you're going to send to them and all those kinds of things. So it makes that process easier. But the other cool thing that you can do is you can see what's going on around them. So I don't know how easy it is for you to read this in this particular window, but what that arrow is pointing to is some text that says St. Paul's School. So to create this impression of being local, you can say to them, oh, I see you're right near St. Paul's School. Yeah, we do a lot of work over that way. I haven't told them anything untrue. I haven't told them that I know everything about that area or that I live there too or something like that, but I've given them the feeling that I'm local and that I know where they are and I know their community. And that just creates this sort of nice, warm fuzzy. And then you just kind of move straight on to the next part of the process. So these are the tools that we use to create a nice, smooth customer experience. Now, to show you how this works in practice, I'm going to show you the script and everything right now. To show you how this works in practice, I'm just going to pick a scenario. And the scenario that I'm picking is it's a roofing company. I need to qualify for a location, who owns the property. I need to ask for both owners. A lot of people do. And what the structure of the roof is. Is it sloped, flat? That's what I need out of the call. Your use case may be different. If it is, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk with you about it. All of these things are usually customized for every company and your particular needs. But this is what we're going to use for the webinar here today. So, ring, ring. Thanks for calling ABC Roofing. How can I help you? Hi, I have a leak in my roof and I'd like to get a quote on replacing it, please. So this image that you see right here, this is the Property Scout interface when you start. And so I'm not actually going to start in my CRM. I'm going to start here. I'm going to start typing the address. And what it's going to do is it's going to give me an autocomplete. So what I now have is a situation where someone says, I'm at 220 Main Street in Berlin. So often they don't tell you what state they're calling from, right? Or what county they're calling from or whatever. So if you're in a situation where you have a multi-state operation, the worst thing you can do is say, what state are you calling from? Because they immediately know that you have no idea where they are. So if you're in a situation, as you see here, where you have a New Hampshire and you have a Connecticut and you have a Maryland, which are all the city of Berlin, you can say, great, and what's your zip code there? Now you know who you're talking to and where they are. You click on that, and the very next thing that happens is all that information that I just showed you pops up in front of you, right? So to get started, could you give me your property address so I can make sure you're in our service area? Sure, I'm at 220 Main Street in Berlin. Great. What's your zip code there? They tell you. Now you know it's Connecticut. And now we're ready to just sort of move on. Great. And may I have your name, please? My name is Ryan Kelly. Ding, check. So you now know, without having to ask any other questions, that Mr. Kelly is the person that owns this property. And importantly, you have 100% confirmed that you've got the right person and the right property. So now you can start taking this information and copying it, including the correct spelling of their last name, et cetera, copying it into your CRM, and you know that it's right. This is how we avoid sending reps to the wrong place. You are also now empowered to be able to say, if Mr. Kelly is not the homeowner, we can start asking some follow-up questions. What's going on with that? You can start looking at the other elements that are here. You can start looking at the year the house was built. You can start looking at the value, anything else that you may need to see. You can see from the street view if it's a commercial property, for example. Any way you may need to disqualify them, a lot of that is already right in front of you. Okay, and we're going to say, Mr. Kelly, great. What's a good number to reach you on the day of your appointment? And he's going to tell us, and then we're going to run along here. So this is leading up to the all parties ask. This is the most difficult, weirdest, most likely to get pushback. Why are you asking me this kind of awkward question in the whole remodeling process? I don't want to start with that. And I definitely don't want to wait until the very end of the script when I'm just getting ready to schedule. And now all of a sudden I want to ask them who owns the property. And they're like, why are you asking me? That makes it weird. So I'll say, okay, thanks, Mr. Kelly. We're plugged into a public records database, and it looks like your home was built in 1920. Does that sound about right? Nice, casual, breezy question. Well, maybe we don't care, for our process and our qualification needs, what year his home was built. But by asking him that question, which is very non-threatening, what we're really actually doing is proving to him that we can, in fact, see information about his property in a way that's not going to set him off or trigger him. Right? So we're going to say, and he's going to say, yeah, that sounds about right. Great. And then the next thing we're going to say is, oh, and it looks like you own the home with another person, Catherine Atkinson. Would that be your spouse or perhaps a family member? And then at this point, most people will say, oh, that's my wife. And then you move on. Now you know who owns the property and what the relationship between the people is. This can still be weird. But if this is weird, this is the least weird way of getting this information. And it's definitely a whole lot better than trying to do it all at the end when you're scheduling. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create space. We've gotten the information that we need. We've done a basic qualification. We're now going to create space and build rapport with the customer. We're going to start engaging them and asking them probing questions to find out what's going on in their world and what's going on with their project, right? And in so doing, we're going to build that rapport before we ask for all parties. So the first step here is to obtain what we call dissatisfaction. We're going to ask friendly, open-ended questions about why the person is calling. For example, if we were to ask them, do you have any leaks in your roof? And they say no, we've just reinforced in their mind that they probably don't need the appointment, right? But if we say, do you have any leaks in your roof that you know of? And they go, I don't think so. Now they're wondering about it. They're doing like a little mental visual inspection of their roof and their attic and whatever else they've seen recently to try and figure out if there is a problem there, but now they're wondering, right? We build a little bit of urgency in that uncertainty. How long has this been a problem? When was the last time you checked your attic? Those kinds of questions that start getting them thinking, maybe I really do need this appointment, especially if there's just someone standing at the door and they weren't thinking about this and they think the roof's fine. When was the last time you had it inspected? Never is usually the most common answer. So in that case, they're like, okay, sure. What the heck? Like maybe there is a leak and I just don't know about it, but I don't want moisture coming into a warm, dark space in my attic because what grows in warm, dark, wet spaces, right? Okay, so we get them to sell us on why they need the appointment. That builds their motivation for keeping the appointment with us, and then we're going to validate their decision to call or to answer the door or to agree to it or whatever. Say, hey, so it sounds like you do have an older roof. Along the way, we may have asked how old the roof is. It sounds like you do have an older roof and you haven't gotten it inspected in a while. If absolutely nothing else, it's a great idea to get your roof looked at once every couple of years, right? And they go, oh, okay. And so now we've built a little bit of urgency. And we're going to obtain any additional qualifiers that we need at this point. Now we're going to pivot and we're going to sell the value of the visit. Remember, we're not trying to sell the roof on the phone. We can't do that. But what we can do is sell the value of the appointment. And the value here is that we're not just giving them a quote. A quote is a number on a sheet of paper. Say, okay, so it sounds like we can definitely help you with that. What we'd like to do is come out and build you a detailed scope of work. A detailed scope of work is a deliverable that has value. An expert has compiled it for you. It's not just a number on a sheet of paper. So now we're giving them something of value, and they're thinking to themselves that there is something more here than just getting a number on a sheet of paper. There's value to me, and makes them more likely to want to keep the appointment, right? And then we will end this by saying, that way, when it comes time to get your project started, you'll know exactly what's involved and what it will cost. Does that sound helpful? I cannot tell you how many people I have heard doing something like this. And instead of saying, does that sound helpful? They'll say, sound good? Or okay? And it's this like super casual question. People go, yeah, sure. But if you ask them, does that sound helpful? And they say yes, they now are thinking that they're going to get help for free, and that has value to them. All these little bits of subtlety that pull down the friction when it comes time to get your project started. We're not going to hard pressure you. We're not going to twist your arm, right? But we're just going to give you help. It's not going to cost you anything, and people will go along with that. That then sets us up to be able to ask for our commitments, the things that we need out of this call. We need them to agree to give us the time to do this appointment. We usually use 60 to 90 minutes. You might use something different, but asking someone for an hour or an hour and a half or whatever your ask is a whole lot easier once you've built the value, right? And they know that you're going to be doing work on their behalf and giving them a deliverable, whether or not you literally hand them a complete scope of work or not. Like I'm not saying that you have to like physically create a whole scope of work right in front of them and hand it to them, but at the very least, you're going to build a detailed quote and then show them the price, right? That takes work. Work takes time. And that time now has value to them. Whereas if you just said, all right, we'll come out and take a look and give you a quote. Sound good? That sounds like they're going to be there for 5 minutes. Then you say, hey, 60, 90 minutes. And they go, why? Why does it take so long? We're proactively getting rid of a lot of these objections. And then here comes the hard one, the all parties request. So we know who owns the property from Property Scout. We know what the relationship is from that nice, casual, breezy question that we asked a while ago. We've built some rapport. We've gone through what's going on with their project. We've built their motivation. We've shown them some value. And now we just want to make a nice, easy, light touch ask. We'd love to find a convenient time for you and your wife to get all your questions answered at once. What would be the best time to catch you at home, mornings or afternoons? Right? Simple. Super simple. And most people will just accept it and go, okay. And then what happens? You end up with both decision makers. Not that we would ever say decision makers on the phone, but you end up with both decision makers, right? So 2 things here. 1, we put in there so we can get all your questions answered at once. What does that do? It stops the objection, not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time, of why does she need to be there? Duh, I already told you. So we can get all your questions answered at once. And then I generally recommend saying that we will use mornings or afternoons because those are generally the most difficult slots to fill. Again, if this gets weird, it's the least weird way of doing it, and you will get both parties present much more of the time. Now we're going to schedule a time to meet. We're going to do a wrap up, and what we're going to leave them with is a statement that addresses that second challenge, the affordability challenge. Everything else, we've done everything that we can to help build that trust, build their motivation, pull down the things that they're worried and afraid about. But we do need to address the affordability piece before we leave. And we'll say something along the lines of, please make sure that you ask your rep about any specials that we have running right now. And we have some great flexible payment options that can make projects super affordable. We don't ever say the word financing. Financing is a 4-letter word. Financing means it's too expensive and you can't afford it. Right? So instead, we say flexible payment options, which means the exact same thing, but it's not nearly as triggering for people. Okay? So we leave them with this idea that not only is the project important and the meeting is valuable, but that we can make sure that you can afford it and address that last friction point. Professional ending, thanks so much. If you have any other questions, whatever the ending is for you, that's the basic idea. So in summary, we've been at this for about 30 minutes with me explaining all of this, but the actual real call should take about 5 minutes. Like a good call is like a crab cake. It's all meat, very little filler. You give them what they need to feel comfortable keeping the appointment. You get what you need to make sure that you're issuing a great lead to your sales rep, and then you stop, right? So unless there's a whole lot of discussion or a whole lot of pushback or whatever, a 5-6 minute call is really pretty normal here. Friendly, smooth, and to the point, while making sure that each party gets what they need to actually move forward. We've built their motivation, built the value of the meeting, and we've created this feeling of being in safe hands, that we are going to take good care of them and that we're going to make sure that their project gets taken care of well. And when your CSR on the phone with that friendly, professional tone, smiling, because you can hear a smile through the voice, you can hear a smile through the phone, and addressing that affordability right off the jump puts you in the absolute best position to be successful as you move down the funnel. So I hope that you found that super valuable. That's all for me. Super happy to take your questions, but I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn if you'd like to reach out. If you have any questions about how you can implement this in your organization, I'd love to talk with you about it. My email address is there. Please feel free to email me anytime. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Caleb.
Dan, that's fantastic. I love just the data you had and the process work and scripting work. And there are a couple of things there I think we take in our own organization to flip around. I want to invite people, though, the attendees, if you have a question, put it in the chat and I'll read it out to Dan and we'll get that answered. Please do grab his contact details here while the webinar's up and just reach out to him, connect with him on LinkedIn. Fantastic resource just to stay in touch with him, follow him and see where he goes with Master Key Marketing. I do have some questions, so while we wait for anything to come in on the chat, Dan, and one of them was really around implementation. If you say, look, there's a lot going on here. We've got scripts, we've got some tech, we've got just different operations. What would you say would be the first step for a business owner or a call center manager to take action?
Yeah, so the first step in my mind is always to make sure that you've got decent data and you know where you're starting from and you know what problem you're trying to solve. So are you having a challenge converting your raw leads to set leads? Maybe you're not answering all the phone calls that are coming into your company right now. That's a pretty big one. Are you having a challenge getting those set leads to actually stick into issued leads? Are you having a challenge getting those issued leads to demo? Where are the holes in your process today? Because anytime we're applying medicine to a problem, we want to make sure that we really well understand the problem. Then once you've got that sort of laid out and you've got some decent data, you'll be able to see what the impact of these different interventions is on improving your outcome. So I think that's really the first step. And then the second step is to just pretend like you're a customer or get some people that you know who aren't in the industry to just listen to phone calls or secret shop you, call in, talk to your CSRs pretending to be customers and get their really candid, brutally honest feedback. How did the call feel? Did it make sense to them? Did they like it? Did it feel motivational to them? Do they still have concerns after it? Did it raise new concerns that they didn't have before? All those kinds of things, and figure out what you're aiming for. And then you start implementing a scripting process like we've talked about today. There are a whole bunch of them out there. There are a bunch of consultants like myself that help build them. There are some books that you can buy. And so some trainings that you can go to. There's a bunch of stuff on YouTube if you want to try and DIY it. Lots of options for you there, but making sure that you're on a rigorous, repeatable, scalable process is the most important part, because if you're not, you can't trust the data that comes after, right? So that making sure that it's well-trained, that you've done the role plays, and that you're delivering a best-in-class customer experience that you can measure is what will empower you to take the next step and move your organization forward, no matter where you're starting from.
I love it about capturing the data. So often we're inclined to just take action and start working on a script or something. And you're right, get a baseline. Let's figure out what we've got. And then we have something to measure against to improve from there.
Yep.
This sounds, in some ways it sounds expensive. And from a software perspective, what are some of the software costs that you get into when implementing some of these solutions?
Well, assuming that you already have a CRM in place, and everyone should have some sort of software that manages their customer relationships. The Property Scout solution, for the reason that we brought it on, even before we had this process sort of fleshed out, is that it's really quite affordable. I mean, you're paying, you're paying pennies per record to have this really smooth, efficient process. And again, it's not like you can't go hack this all together yourself somewhere. But while the CSRs are trying to load this screen and that screen, there's the ums and the ahs and the long pauses, and the calls get weird and they get long, and the customers are going, what are they doing over there, right? So for a couple of cents a record, it really does make sense to use a tool like this that puts it all in one place. And I just want to tell the people on the webinar, I'm not here to like pitch Property Scout. I'm here because I believe in Property Scout and because I've seen it transform organizations. In fact, we were just talking, I just had a brand new company start rolling out Property Scout today, and the CSRs that saw it were like, oh my God, this is miles better. It's a multi-state operation, and they have this horrible spreadsheet that literally has like 75 links to county assessors' offices. And so on every call, they're having to go, oh God, what county is that in? And they ask the people, so wait, what state are you in? Oh, okay, all right. And what county is that out where you are? All right, hang on. I gotta see if I can find this. Yeah, hang on, click. It's horrible. It's horrible for it's painful. It's painful for the customers, and it's painful for the CSRs. And then the customers are like, why are you wasting my time with all of this? So from a cost standpoint, the tool is not terribly expensive at all. And the value that you get out of it, from my perspective, is extraordinary.
Thanks. The one last question here is objection handling. And maybe just give a number one objection you get, or if you get pushback from customers during the script, what are some of the ways that you're dealing with that?
Yeah, so like you're going to get a lot of people when the process is laid out this way who are just going to go with you, right? If they don't feel defensive, if they don't feel threatened, like people aren't trying to pick fights, right? So they'll just say, okay. And you just sort of go through it and everybody's happy. And at the end of the day, you're good. But people will push back sometimes on that 60, 90 minutes. Why does it take so long? It's like, well, Mr. Jones, we are coming out. We're going to do a complete inspection. We definitely want to sit down with you and talk about what's important to you and your family, make sure we get all your questions answered. And then we need to build out that scope of work. And there's a fair amount of work to make sure that the scope of work is complete. That's really the only way that we can give you a fair price, number one. And number two, that you know what our commitments are. There are a lot of contractors that'll just come out and scribble some numbers on a sheet of paper. And then at the end, if you're not happy with something, you don't know really what their scope of work was supposed to be, what they were committing to do. So this is really just how we make sure that everybody starts out on the same page at the very beginning, et cetera, right? So things like that, you can get your CSRs to do, you can script it out for them. It's going to be a little bit different from every company. Everyone's got a little bit of a different tone. For some people, that answer is going to seem too long. For some people, that answer is going to seem perfect. Some people want to explain it even more so you never get to a second objection. Whatever your particular perception is, this is something that you just sort of work through and you evolve as you go forward through time, again, using that data as a foundation. So if you are resulting out your calls in a dialer or a CRM or whatever it is you're using today, and you see a whole bunch of result codes that people wouldn't agree to terms, you can go back, listen to those calls, see where those holes are, and craft ever better, ever smoother objections. And then you train. You sharpen the saw. Role playing is everything, because you don't want them mechanically reading a script like a robot. You want them delivering it with integrity and empathy and a smile through the phone. And doing that just requires being a human.
Fantastic. Hey, Dan, I'm going to wrap it here, but thanks again for preparing this presentation, for sharing your experience. And that's just fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.